do a long deserved and long needed discussion topic that I haven't done a discussion topic like this in forever. Um, what this topic is going to be about is the discussion of one of the most influential and one of the biggest franchises of all video games, Resident Evil. Now, I'm going to be discussing a little bit about what
Come on, no,
just
don't, you cowards!
just in case you guys don't know any of the history behind Resident Evil, I will explain a little bit throughout the games, and tell you the games that are, in my opinion, the best ones of Resident Evil, and which ones shouldn't even exist. With that being said, we got a very special guest here, my co-partner and editor for my channel, Wade.
Hi.
And he has not been that much of a part of the Resident Evil franchise, so this will be a learning experience for him, just like everyone else. Now, with that being said, the topics, like I said, we will be talking. And the last topic I will be explaining. I will be explaining is the history, which games are good and bad, and also where do I think they are going to go pick up after the recent success of their games. With that being said, we'll start the topic right now. And yes, I will be playing Battlefront 2 Heroes vs. Villains in the background. So that being said, let's get it started.
This is bad because I'm more focused on the game. I'm just real annoyed because they're just gangbanging. They're just constantly ganking because none of them have any skill.
Yeah. Now, the world of Resident Evil is not as convoluted and confusing as everybody has said it's gotten. With all the Resident Evil other games, yes, it has gotten very confusing. But it all started in the very first Resident Evil, where they are in this mansion and they are looking for recent activities due to what one of their teams go down, and they are found in a mansion, and basically they were going around the mansion seeing what was going on, and in that mansion everybody was they were all getting chased down by zombies, and dogs, basically everything alike. Among the people of the STARS unit, which is a very special team unit that is basically said to be one of the best police force of all time, the sad part about it was there was one of the best operatives, which becomes a BSAA operative in the long run, Jill Valentine, and Chris Redfield, which I don't know if Jill Valentine ever became BSAA. I don't really think she did, but Chris Redfield did become BSAA, which is a bioterrorism unit set to take out basically any of the zombies infected areas. After Resident Evil 1, which we find out that Wesker was the captain of the STARS unit, and he betrays the STARS unit due to Umbrella. Umbrella is the mastermind behind everything. They're the reason why zombies are appearing in the world in general. They were really interested in money, basically, like how all bad companies go rogue, and in that case did not care about all of the consequences due to the virus, and basically they were responsible for the basically end of the world. Now, after Resident Evil 1, there became Resident Evil 2, which is the first introduction to Leon S. Kennedy, one of the most, if not the single most important character in all of the Resident Evil franchise. He is basically um, uh, how can I explain how important he is? Basically, he is the Spider-Man of the Spider-Man movies. You can't have it's almost impossible to have a Resident Evil game without Leon either being mentioned or even showing up. Leon starts out as a rookie cop in Raccoon City. He gets his first in touch with the zombie outbreak. He lives with it along with another agent named Claire Redfield, which is Chris Redfield's sister, and you will see her in a few other games. And with that being said, Resident Evil 2 became one of the best Resident Evil games of all time. After Resident Evil 2, we still had a little bit more into looking at what was going on in Raccoon City, thanks to our nice friend again, Jill Valentine. After Jill Valentine we got to see Leon again in the depths of dealing with the Los Plagas parasites, which again is another form of zombie outbreak, but it was caught, I believe, in Eastern Europe, I think, if I remember called. Then after that, we got into Resident Evil 5, where they went to Africa, and this is Chris Redfield being back into the game. Chris Redfield, along with his new teammate, Sheva, any way you want to pronounce her name, went into Africa to figure out what this thing was called Ouroboros, which is another form of virus that is basically the same thing as creating bioweapons, which is what people have started calling the zombies instead of just calling them walking zombies or walkers or any term you want to call them. Bioterrorism is technically what they considered it to be after considering it a worldwide epidemic. Now, after Resident Evil 5, because, I gotta mention, the person behind the Ouroboros was Wesker. We got to meet him again. And with the history with Chris that he has, you can already tell Chris has a very big, personal vendetta against Wesker, and Wesker has a vendetta against Chris. Now, after Chris kills Wesker, we are now brought into the Resident Evil 6 mode, where we get both Chris and Leon showing back up again, and we get those two getting in touch with each other during another epidemic where depending on where you start, you'll be fighting this new type of virus called the G virus. And who's behind the G virus, you may ask? Well, guys, it's no one better than the company that started it all in the first place, Umbrella, but they came up with a new name calling themselves Neo Umbrella, which obviously, if you know what Neo stands for, and I believe in like Spanish, I think Neo is new.
Neo is new in general.
Yeah, so Neo is new.
It's a preprix for a new rebranding of something that has existed before.
Yeah. So, after Resident Evil 6, which we had a couple different storylines of saying who was responsible, but it was mostly, like I said, a thing with Neo Umbrella, and we also had Simmons to be blamed for the epidemics. Now, after Resident Evil 6, we either got a reboot or a continuation with the story, which is Resident Evil 7, or if as many people know it right now as Resident Evil Biohazard, where you get to meet this man named Ethan that is looking for his wife in a place that he doesn't know has been taken over by a evil monster, and made basically the whole lovable family there, that is what you may read about, becoming very vicious and very sick and sadistic killers. After Ethan, depending on the ending you choose, Ethan is rescued and leaving with his wife, or he's rescued and leaving by himself. Whichever ending you choose, it's whether or not he kills his wife or not. Now, with all that being explained, we are going to be explaining the side stories, which is a few backstories that Resident Evil decided to make that is a little convoluted. Like I said, it does get a little convoluted due to Resident Evil making a few different games that probably aren't part of the story. So, with that being said, we'll continue on. The games that were convoluted a little bit was Resident Evil Vendetta, Resident Evil Code Veronica, and Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City. Operation Raccoon City is where you play the STARS unit, you play the Umbrella Corporation, and you hunt down basically the samples of the virus and keeping everything from getting out, and everyone realizing Umbrella caused everything. And it does give you a point to where you can kill Leon and Claire and Sherry, which, if you love Leon as much as I do, you didn't choose to kill Leon. Otherwise, the other Resident Evil game that we have to mention, that is one of the best Resident Evil games in my personal opinion, is Resident Evil Revelations. Revelations is a two-game series of Resident Evil that involves Jill Valentine playing again in a ship infected by new bioterrorisms, and the second the second Revelations 2 is going into Claire's story and seeing where she leaves off after the events that she was in Resident Evil 2. What's up, Dylan? Sorry, I'm just doing a live stream video. Yeah. So, with all that being explained on the history of Resident Evil, it is now time to be able to discuss the what is in my opinion would be the best Resident Evil games for you guys to play, and which would be the absolute worst. Now, for all of the Resident Evil games that have been out there, there's been a lot of good Resident Evil games, like I've mentioned before, that have came and went, lived out its purpose to get a good story going, and then just got left behind. Now, if you're going to be picking up any old PlayStation systems or Xbox, depending what you like to play, some of the games probably won't be on Xbox, but we'll see where that goes. Anyways, one of the best Resident Evil games to play is Resident Evil 2. Not to mention, if you're a big fan of Leon, and his character, it's always best to see him in a game, not to also mention just the way he acts in the games and sees every single zombie mode and everything, and the graphics in the game look really good. Now, what version you should play? You should play the remake on the PlayStation 4. You know, you can pick up the old one on PlayStation 2 as well. You know, obviously look, it's gonna look old age, obviously, because it's a PlayStation 1 game. But it never hurts to see what was shown for the PlayStation 1. Now, with Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 2 is now replacing my my used to be favorite Resident Evil game, which was Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 2 is now by far my favorite, but not by much. Resident Evil 4 is one of the best games I've ever played of Resident Evil. Like I mentioned, it used to be my favorite until I played Resident Evil 2 Remake. Now, with Resident Evil 2's Remake being out, they made Resident Evil 3 Remake, which I did play the demo. It looks really good. I don't know if I would recommend it, because I did skip the third one before playing any of the others. So when I played the demo, it looked pretty good, but I heard Resident Evil 3 is kind of one of the shorter games, so you know, it may be a good game to pick up, but you don't expect it to be giving out as much the fear and the experience of Resident Evil like all the other games are. Now, with the good games being out of the way, which before I say that, another game you need to pick up from Resident Evil that's one of the best, pick up Revelations 2. Because it's always good to play as Claire again, see how she, you know, since she is one of the most important characters in all of Resident Evil, you get to just do so much. The story in the game is just by far beautiful. It gives you connections to the characters more than what I think any, if not most, if not any Resident Evil has ever done. Not to also mention, it's just a very good graphic game. Otherwise, if you are going to look at any other Resident Evil game that is good, Biohazard was one of the best, coming back to its horror stance instead of making all of the other Resident Evil games look like they're not scary. So with the good games being out of the way, we gotta talk about the bad games. Now, with the bad games of Resident Evil, what you honestly shouldn't touch, if not, shouldn't touch at all, if not, maybe just play through the story just to get through it. Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 6 was Resident Evil's downfall. Resident Evil 6 had no flavor to its story. The new characters they put in, that is Jake and Piers in the game, are just not even worth even trying to discuss who they are, due to the fact that the characters just did not have any interesting thing to talk to them about. After that, it doesn't have any horror that Resident Evil games have been known to do. It did not make it to where you are surviving at the seat of your teeth like Resident Evil has been known to do. It just wasn't a good game in general. Same goes for Resident Evil Code Veronica. just not anything in general to talk about that at all either. And Operation Raccoon City was just a flat out mess. The zombies were way too glitchy. The what else? What else is there to say about it? The characters, the guns were just pitiful to use. There's just so much to complain about that game that I don't have enough time to explain about the game. So, not like, I highly say do not pick up the game. Now, after talking about the good and the bad Resident Evil games, let's talk about where Resident Evil should be at, what we are now expecting Resident Evil to go through. Now, with Resident Evil having a good coming back to being a very good popular game now, with Resident Evil 2's remake and Resident Evil 7 coming out and having very good success, we now have Resident Evil being doing remakes, which we have seen Resident Evil 3's remake, but like I've already looked at some of the reviews, Resident Evil 3's remake does not seem like it got all that good amount of reviews, due to the fact that it really didn't add anything new to what we already had, due to we already getting what Resident Evil 2 had, and their graphics with the zombies are still the same instead of adding something new. Even though Nemesis look was really interesting, it could not save it from getting as harsh of a reviews as it did, but it still had a pretty good success. Now, with that being said, we have to also look at what Resident Evil 7 gave to Resident Evil. Like I explained before, Resident Evil 7 gave back its scare, its horror, and its popularity. So, with that going on, now we have to look at what the future could be for Resident Evil.
God! Jesus. No one can compare 1v1 anymore.
I had to talk to my roommate for a second, guys. Alright. To answer your question, Dylan, I'm playing Star Wars Battlefront 2. Now, anyways, okay. Now, with everything I just said, what can we expect from Resident Evil in the events of what has been recently going on? Now, with Resident Evil having obviously the tendency to look of that they are interested in doing remasters, it has not been announced or approved yet, but we are expecting a Resident Evil 4 remake. We are not expecting it to be remastered anymore like it has been every single other console. Like Resident Evil 7, like I said, guys, is one of the most popular games that has ever came to that was ever made from Resident Evil, due to the fact that it has been remastered. It was on the PlayStation 2, and it's been remastered for the PS3 and PS4 and even the Wii.
Hey, Jacob, I got 3 people over here on me.
Alright.
Oh,
And if you look at on the Xbox 2, you'd probably see the exact same situation. Now, what what do I mean by a complete remaster? Well, we'll obviously be getting new graphics. The zombies are obviously going to be looking a lot more different than what the PlayStation 2 version is, and we will obviously see different guns maybe and different costumes. There's a lot of things that could be happening for the new remake. Now, um, what we will be expecting for this remake, as I said, we are obviously going to be expecting the Resident Evil 4 remake to either be on the PlayStation 4 or the PlayStation 5. Now, here's the reason why we say this, guys, because this is going to be a very heated topic and probably a very interesting topic that everyone's going to be wanting to talk about in the upcoming events. Now, obviously with Capcom, um, Capcom has obviously, like we said before, is obviously really into wanting to do remakes due to the fact that we've seen both the first, second, and third one being remade. So the fourth one obviously is an expectation that we obviously know is going to happen, no matter what anybody else says. Now, when we should be expecting to get this said remake is going to be a little bit more difficult to expect. I'd say I personally am going to give out my opinion about it, and I think it will be either late this year or at least early of next year. Now, reason I say it with this, guys, is because, like I said, with the recent what's that word with the recent success that the Resident Evil 2 remake gave out to the Resident Evil community, and with the Resident Evil 3 remake, even though it may not have been the absolute greatest like Resident Evil 2 was, we have to admit that it did give us hope for them continuing on with remakes. Now, the reason we are saying that it is going to be late this year or early next year is a few reasons. One, like I mentioned earlier, we already have Resident Evil 4 for the PS4. It would not make that much sense to put out a remastered version of the Resident Evil 4 if we already have the said old version, if you want to put it out like that, the old version of the Resident Evil 4 game on the same console. That just really wouldn't make any sense. And, no one's going to want to pay any money for a brand new version of the game when they can easily have free access to the old version of the game. Unless you are really into collecting every version of the game, that's just kind of the thing. Now, what we should be expecting the game to come out for is going to be for the PS5. Now, with this being said, it may still be given out to the old consoles, but the main reason we want to put it out to saying that it is going to be released in the time around the new consoles is because, again, like I said, you're not gonna want to pay more money for the same type of version of the game that you already have. Not to also mention, with these new consoles going to be coming out, not a lot of people are going to be looking at those old console games anymore. they're going to be looking at the fresher games that maybe will get remastered for the PS5, or it gives backwards compatibility, so you can do it that way. Now that's also saying for the Xbox, giving them backwards compatibility with them too, or just remastering them too. Um, so in the sense of, like I'm saying, it is for Resident Evil, the Resident Evil 4 remake should be getting remastered, or just a complete remake in general for the PS5. Now, is that going to be saying that it's going to come out the same time as PS5? We probably won't get this Resident Evil remake until, like I said, the late this year or early next year. Probably early as in maybe before next summer. Um, we'll be seeing that. Um, uh, anyways, another thing we have to also mention again is we're also going to be getting, with PS5, going to be getting a lot more upgrades to its graphics and everything, like, better than the PlayStation 4. They're gonna have to focus on not only looking at making the graphics better. They're gonna have to make it to where the PS5 can give out its full capability of the feeling of the controls, the excitement. Not to also mention, they're gonna do stuff with, maybe new stuff with the story. They're gonna be there's just a lot that they will be having to do with the Resident Evil 4 remake. Now, what else can we be expecting from it? I'll be expecting a announcement for the Resident Evil 4 remake to be obviously either before or after PS5 is fully announced when it's coming out. So I will say we'll probably get it soon, if not maybe in the next few months, or maybe until next year. So that is what we are expecting for the Resident Evil 4 remake. Is it going to be a popular success? I personally will say yes, due to the fact that Resident Evil 4, like I already said before, Resident Evil 4 was already said to be the best Resident Evil game of all time. Not just by me, but by anybody who is a fan of Resident Evil. They can say that there wasn't a lot, if not any, problems with Resident Evil 4. The only problems you get would be maybe small glitches, some annoyance with the characters, aka how annoying Ashley was, which everybody can agree the only reason everybody liked Ashley being around was to look up her dress every time you jump down a ladder. So with that being said, that is all of what we should be expecting from the Resident Evil 4 game. Now, after Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, what should we be expecting for a new Resident Evil game? Now, obviously, with the success of Resident Evil 7, we already know there is going to be a new Resident Evil game, because one, Resident Evil 7 made a very good success in the market. Also, it did kind of leave off on a cliffhanger, with depending on the type of ending you get. I mean, even with the ending you got, no matter what, even the DLCs you played, there is still cliffhangers to be discussed. And not to also mention, and this is another thing we should be expecting, we should be expecting them to finally announce if Resident Evil 7 takes place in the Resident Evil series, like in 1 through 6, or if this is a completely new storyline. Now, if this is a new storyline, we are going to be expecting a Resident Evil sequel to it, and we will be expecting the main character being Leon, or we should be expecting him to make an appearance. Reason why I'm saying this is because if you guys have paid attention to the way the games get released and the orders that they have came out with the games, Leon and Chris have always had either a game or two apart from each other before either one of them made an appearance. Like I said, with Resident Evil, it started out with Chris. Resident Evil 2 was Leon. Resident Evil 4 also was Leon as well. And then we had Resident Evil 5, which was with Chris. Then we had 6, which was with both of them. And now with 7, we did also have, I think they announced that was Chris, not a hero for the DLC. That was Chris Redfield. Now, with that being said, with the order that I discussed, we should be expecting a Leon appearance in the sequel, since it does seem like they are following this kind of whatever you want to say, formula. Will he have a big part in the second one? In the sequel to Biohazard? Most likely, if not a decent part. Probably have his own DLC like what Chris did. Maybe a playable scene in the main mission, if he is not the main character. Otherwise, if that is the case, if that's not the case, and this Resident Evil Biohazard is a continuation for the Resident Evil series, the Resident Evil 1 through 7, then we will have to start looking at what happened to Chris and Leon after their recent blow through with Resident Evil 6. Not to also mention, why is Chris looking the way he is? He does look a lot younger, which is making everybody think this isn't a continuation with the series, due to the fact that he looks a lot younger than what he is and not as buff as he was. Not to also mention, he is in an Umbrella uniform. So there's a lot of questions that is needing to be answered. Not to also mention, again, what if this is a continuation to the series? Is it before all of the Resident Evil games? Is it after all of them? And if it is after all of them, who is behind the new Umbrella situation? And will we see them in the sequel? Now, one other thing we also are going to need to mention is that with Resident Evil, with this being the case that they are going to make a sequel, we are probably going to have to wait. Yeah. I don't know. Anyways, we are going to have to wait, most likely wait till late of next year or in 2 years. The reason why, or the early of the year after next. The reason why I say this one, guys, is due to the fact that Capcom right now is looking like they are more paying attention to remakes right now. So after Resident Evil 4 remake is going to happen, there's obviously not going to be any new guarantees that Resident Evil 5 and 6 are going to be getting a remake. Now, the only thing we could be expecting for those two games is most likely, if not barely, a just a remaster to be put on the PS5 and on the on the the newer consoles. Does that do justice for those games? For 5, no, maybe. For 6, not. For 6, I don't care. Honestly, I wouldn't care about what they do for 6 due to the fact that I don't really like 6. So again, like I said, with Capcom paying more attention to remakes right now, like I said, they are going to be more into thinking about everything that has to do with Resident Evil 4's remake, and then gonna be thinking about what could be the future of Resident Evil 5 and 6. And again, like I said, with Resident Evil, with the sequel to Resident Evil Biohazard, obviously with the with a sequel that obviously should be coming and announcing soon, we'll see whether or not this is a continuation with the story, and if this is replacing the first Resident Evil to make it seem more logical. Why Chris looks a lot less older and a lot less buff. If not, then we are obviously going to be seeing a complete new storyline, and we should be expecting a Leon in the future. Otherwise, I don't see Resident Evil most likely not doing anything anytime soon, unless they might continue with the Revelations storyline, which it does take place during during the first 6. Revelations 2 being the only one I can actually confirm about that comes around the same events as Resident Evil 6 does. Maybe maybe a few days or months, or maybe few days or months before the events of Resident Evil 6, but around the same time, due to the fact that with their characters, they're playing in like the exact you see the same maps from Resident Evil 6 as you do in that game. Not to also mention, Claire even mentions that that she knows that Chris is going out of country to his mission that he goes into in the storyline of Resident Evil 6. So, like I said, it is confirmed that Revelations 1 and 2 are involving in the storyline. I just don't know which part the first one takes place in. So, with all that being said, guys, I'm gonna run through it again. Like I said, I went through the story, what all Resident Evil was around. Play Resident Evil 4, 2. I'd try out 3. Definitely try out the first one. And definitely play the 7th one. Don't play, definitely stay away from the 6. Definitely stay away from Operation Raccoon City. Don't even think about playing that, guys, because like I said, it's just a walking mess. It's just one of those Resident Evil games that it looked like it could have been a good game, and it just completely just disgusted itself and its fans. Resident Evil 5, definitely try out. Me and Lewis had a very good time doing the live stream for that game. We are also, me and Wade are also going to be picking up Resident Evil 5, and we are going to be doing Resident Evil 6 as well. So you will be seeing me and Wade play through Resident Evil 5 and 6. I know I played through 5 on the channel once already, so I might think about doing something new for the channel for those videos instead of me obviously doing the same stuff. Um, Otherwise, with Resident Evil 6, me and Lewis were doing, but we did stop doing that. So we'll pick up that and probably just restart the storyline again, due to the fact that Wade has not played um, most, if not any, um, Resident Evil games, which he has told me he has played a few of the Resident Evil games, just not that many.
I've seen Resident Evil 7. That's it.
Yeah, he's seen Resident Evil 7. So that, like I said, he hasn't played if not any of them. So yeah, good job, Dylan. So with that being said, we most likely will just start Resident Evil 6's storyline all over again, so Wade can know exactly what's going on with all of these story characters, and yeah. So that is what will be coming to the channel. Also, I wanted to mention that too. I am going to be continuing on the Call of Duty game. I have not finished the campaign due to the fact that there's been a lot going on. That the reason why I've just been posting clips of things, not not live streaming anything. So I'll be picking that up and finishing that story mode, and also I'll be doing the Call of Duty Remastered story as well. So yeah. So with all that being said, guys, like I said, with what we're expecting for the Resident Evil, we are expecting a Resident Evil 4 remastered. Probably, most likely, if not definitely, coming for the PlayStation 5 first, if not at all, hitting the old consoles. Like I said, I'll be expecting either the game to be out or to be announced late this year or early next year. Resident Evil, the sequel out for Biohazard, we won't be expecting to be announced or even coming out till late next year, till early in 2 years. So yeah. Otherwise, guys, that is all for the live stream. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Put in the comment section what was your first Resident Evil game. Tell me if you agree with everything. My opinion. If you agree that Resident Evil 4 is going to be getting a remake, when you think it's going to come out, and what was your favorite Resident Evil game. But yeah, guys, like I said, just put in the comment section, let me know if you agree with anything I said. And with that, I will be seeing you guys tonight. I'll most likely be doing a Call of Duty couple of videos tonight, so I can get done with that game and continue with everything else. So with that being said, guys, peace, love you guys, and we'll see you guys next video.